Wow. This is a really big crowd. My name's Ty. I'm Tom Tyree's son, and on behalf of my Aunt Andrea, my Uncle Bob, all of my siblings, all of the grandchildren in our family, we're so grateful that you all are here. I mean, how often do you go to a standing room only funeral, you know? And I love the cheering of the children. The no whining pin only applies to those old enough to understand it. If you're younger, my gosh, make the noise. My dad would always encourage kids to make noise. It is so touching to have so much family here and family in from out of town. My dad would have wanted you to know that you are his favorite. And there's so many friends that have come in from all over the country, and so many people here that knew him and loved him, and you all really need to know that you are my dad's favorite. Even some friends from Unisys and from Trella Health, his jobs over the years. He loved telling stories about you, and you are his favorite. Of course, his church friends. So many friends from church who go here now, so many who I've known for decades, when I was a child running around here making the same noises the children are. First of all, you need to know that the Costco ministry that my dad would run to go pick up cakes and pies, yeah, you're going to have to find somebody else to do that for a while, but know that you are his favorite. And then, of course, so many people from his residence at Springhouse Estates. It is absolutely wonderful to see you here. I was talking with Keith Beal, who works in the Acts community, and he was concerned a little bit about finding a new tech guy to do all the printer fixes and TV fixes and things. But from all of you at Springhouse Estates, you ought to know that you are his favorite. Now, I know that some of you are saying, wait a minute, he told me that I was his favorite. You're right, because that was kind of his thing. I have to apologize. During this eulogy, I promise you I will not get through it without full, flat-on, ugly crying, just like Houston did. Many of you were here a few years ago when I told a story before giving my mom's eulogy about putting down our beloved dog, Pip. I had moved out of the house, and I came home as a responsible young son to help my mom take the dog to the vet to have him put down. And of course, we walked into the vet, we were sobbing, crying, and I gestured to my mom, and I said, Mom, I got this. And I went up to the front desk, and they asked me a question, who were we, why were we here? And all I could muster to say was, I couldn't say a thing. And then I tried again, they asked another question, and again, I could not say a thing. And that helped me through the eulogy. I was really glad that I got to tell you that story because it was so emotional to go through. There were times that the only way to get through it was to kind of a little bit. So, I want to share with you how my dad would deal with emotions. He had a way, when he felt overwhelming grief or emotion coming on, he would hold his hands up over his head, and then he would stretch them out as he inhaled, and he went, try it. Everybody put your hands up above your head. Ready? And I thought it was just like a natural reaction, something he did to try to sort of squelch a cry. But Marcia, are you here somewhere? Hi. Up in the top, everybody say hi to Marcia. Hi, Marcia. Marcia taught me last night, there's actually something biophysical going on. The nictic acid that it creates when you breathe in like that in your navel cavity creates vasodilators that makes it easier to breathe. It gets more oxygen into your body. So it's a wonderful way of dealing with those kinds of strong emotions. And my dad would use that a lot. He cried at very important moments, things like weddings and graduations, really emotional moments in movies, and especially during emotional episodes of Undercover Boss. So, if at any point today you feel overwhelmed, you now have two options. You can either go your way through it, or you can, please feel free to use either of them frequently. My dad's door was always open. Like, figuratively, yeah, but also literally. He always wanted people to feel welcome. If somebody wanted something in his house that they were going to steal, he said, well, they probably needed it more than I did. Because nothing he had was sacred. But every relationship was. A locked door to him was a barrier to a relationship. It was a friend he couldn't help. So it frustrated him so much that my sister Tam, like every other person in the human world, locks her door. He'd show up at her house and go to walk in, and it was locked. Then he'd jiggle the handle and he'd bang on the door. Really obvious that he was perturbed. Because a locked door meant a missed connection. It meant a friend he couldn't help. And leaving his door unlocked, for Tom, that door was always open. He loved to take ordinary events and turn them into extraordinary experiences. This was the era of his medicine ball phase or earth ball phase, where he built a computer program that taught him exactly what arc to create and how to cut the fabric to be able to sew a perfectly round sphere that was a medicine ball. And Ruth, you're right. I remember he was standing there and he'd play with that in the backyard all the time. And on this particular event, we were playing with the ball, pushing it back and forth. And of course, he didn't just make it and give it to kids to play with. He's right there in the middle of it, like, pushing the ball back. And when he went to shove the ball back to the other team, it hit his finger and stoved his ring finger. So suddenly he had all of his fingers still intact, but his ring finger over here was going out that way, sticking out to the side. My dad did not do well with medical emergencies. We left that to my Uncle Bob, the medic. And so we pretty much knew we were going to have to go to the hospital and get this adjusted. So we hopped in, and my wife and I had a pickup truck. I drove, and she sat in the back. And my dad was riding along, and he started to hyperventilate. And he grabbed the Jesus ring, and his finger sticking out over here, and he said, I'm seeing stars. I'm going out. I'm going down. I'm not going to make it. He was convinced that before we got to the ER, he was going to die of a dislocated finger. We got to the hospital. We walked in, and of course, one of his best friends was the head of the ER. Big crowd of people. He ushers, he saw my dad's finger and said, oh, come on back in here. Basically one little jiggle. Anybody in the medical industry knows it's a pretty quick jiggle and sent him home. It turned out to be no big deal. He didn't actually die of a dislocated finger, but he was willing to be able to play a game like that, because for Tom, that door was always open. He loved taking trips. He loved going places. But it wasn't just about going places, it was about taking people there and teaching them something they didn't know. You look here, this is my brother and I, back in the 80s, full of style. And we're standing at the Continental Divide. Many of you probably know the Continental Divide is out in the Rockies, and it's the point on the earth where if water hits on one side, it flows to the Pacific. If water lands on the other side, it flows to the Atlantic. And just that concept of understanding how the world worked and how all of us were in it, everywhere we went, he found us opportunities to learn like that. Because going places to learn new things, for Tom, that door was always open. One of the places he loved to travel was to the beach. He liked the water, but he loved flying kites, and at the beach was always a good win. You never could really get a good picture of him flying a kite, because he'd fly them so high, you could never see the kite and him in the same picture. But I think what he really liked about flying kites was the control. He'd get a stunt kite, and you could turn it to the left and turn it to the right, and the kite would fly back and forth across the sky. He'd make it do loop-de-loops with its big long tail. He had so much fun, and then he especially loved handing that control off to somebody else. To teaching a grandkid how to steer a kite, to giving them the leadership opportunity, the control, and sharing that opportunity for other people to control the situation. Because letting other people take control, for Tom, that door was always open. Yep, we're going to go there again. He would even give up control when there was a probability of undesired consequences. Yeah. We spent about 3 months as a family in Australia. We were in Canberra, Australia, and his company Unisys was paying for the house we were living in, but any excursions on the weekends were our responsibility to pay for. So we'd go up to Melbourne, or we'd go off to different places and see different things around Australia. And my mom was always so frustrated because my dad would get nice hotels with a nice view on the water, on the ocean, fancy breakfasts. She'd say, "Tom, we don't need to spend that money." And so he was very willing to give up control, let somebody else take the lead, even when he was aware there might be undesirable consequences. He said to my mom, he said, "Hey, well, why don't you pick the next hotel?" We were going to Sydney. And in Sydney, there's a less desirable area called King's Cross. But back in the day, there was no internet. There was no way to find out about this. So she looked up in the yellow pages, found this cute little hotel. It's more like a youth hostel, but a cute little hotel. And it was less expensive, and she loved it. And she called him up, and she got the room. So we stayed in that hotel the 2 nights that we were in Sydney. And our room, it's that brick building on the left there, and the window on the top left was where my bed was. And I think they've repaired it since I was there, because when I was there, it would not close but to about 2 inches from being fully closed. It was a 2-inch gap, always open. And the beds were those metal beds you get at like camp with the really thin mattresses, and it squeaks a lot when you sit on them. The bathroom was down the hall. They were nice enough to provide towels, but they didn't provide soap. You had to bring your own soap. Well, of course, we didn't know this, and so we're sitting there and realizing the next morning we're probably going to want to bathe. And so my dad left to walk out and go get soap. Walked down the stairs. My bed was right next to the wall, next to the stairs, and I heard him walk down. I still can remember him, step by step, walking down, opening up the front door, and there was one of those little bells hanging there that the door hit and kind of knocked, and ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling. And then as I heard my dad's shoes cross the street, I heard a woman, I'll never forget the sound of a woman in very loud shoes, walked up to him, and she said, "Hey, honey, are you looking for a good time?" And I'll never forget what he said. He said, "Nope, just looking for some soap." Letting someone else take the lead, even if it had a probability of undesirable consequences, for Tom, that door was always open. My dad's the only person who ever bought a Suburban, the largest SUV on the planet, for a guy who didn't need a Suburban. He bought it to lend it out. And Pastor Gary was just talking about his family. They came in to visit, and the day my dad died, Gary Nicholson was scheduled to borrow Tom's Suburban. Gary said, "Oh my gosh, absolutely not. Obviously, we're not going to take it now. We'll just figure out something else." And I said, "Absolutely not. If my dad found out that I didn't lend you his car when you had expected it, can you imagine what he would do to me?" Because buying a car that he didn't need so he could lend it out to other people, for Tom, that door was always open. He went to college at Vanderbilt University back in the 60s. Of course, back in the 60s, you didn't have headphones or iPods or iPads or anything to be able to sort of distract you from all the noises that happen in a college dorm. My dad was lucky enough to have a record player, so he had like Muzak in the background to distract him. But he realized that so many of his classmates would also benefit from Muzak. So he climbed up into the attic of his dorm, he wired up the record player, he put wires down through the walls into every room in the dorm, and he set a little brown speaker on the right with a little knob on the bottom that you can change the volume. He put that in everybody's room. And then if you paid the fee for the Muzak, he would connect your speaker line, and then you could turn on or off or change the volume on your background noise and share that. Now, this is back in the day of record players. He'd get a stack of records on top of his record player. And for those of you who don't know, record players could automatically change to the next song and would drop the record down, and the needle would go over and play that entire record. Another one would drop down, and the needle would play the whole thing. So he had music for hours. And his classmates loved it, absolutely loved it. But the school felt a little otherwise. They found out what he had done, and they pulled him into the dean's office and reprimanded him for ripping holes in the door and poking wires all over, and for running an unapproved student-run business on campus. That was a big no-no. The problem was this was really valuable to his classmates. He wanted them to have it. So he sold his business to Vanderbilt. Exactly. He was so concerned about his friends, he cared less about his business than he did about his friends. And he wanted to create a good experience for his friends because for Tom, that door was always open. My dad was honest to a fault. Always found good things to say about you. Like, no matter what he'd say, what he thought, what actually was going on, he would always find a good thing to say something nice. But he was incredibly honest. He never, ever could tell a lie. About a year ago, my daughter started playing high school tennis, and he attended her very first match. And after the match was over, he had watched the whole thing and enjoyed it. And my daughter came off the court, and he said, "Lauren, your forehand looked beautiful. Your stroke was great. Everything else was a disaster, but your forehand looked really good." Because being uncomfortably honest for people, for Tom, that door was always open. He believed in the power of prevenient Skittles. I'm seeing a lot of nodding faces because you all were part of his confirmation class and you know what prevenient Skittles are. He loved using toys and candy to explain extremely complex biblical concepts. On the first day of confirmation, he'd bring out a big box and set it in the room, and they'd start having their lessons and doing things and playing some games, a little bit around the box. Finally got the box open through some game, and in it was a gumball machine full of Skittles. And he would explain that those Skittles had been there the whole time. Even though they didn't know, the students didn't know that those Skittles were available, even though they didn't know that they actually wanted them, even though they didn't know how good they would taste, the Skittles had been there all the time, just like God's love. Pardon me. God's love, before we even knew what it was, before we even knew what it felt like, before we even knew it, how much we wanted it, God's love has always been there for us, just like prevenient Skittles. Because using candy and toys to explain biblical concepts for Tom, that door was always open. My dad believed in each of us before we gave him a reason to. It was sort of his prevenient faith in each of us, always there before we even knew we needed it. He welcomed over 150 foster children in his house in his lifetime. This is the Jaworks mixed in with Ted, Tam, and I and my mom there. Great family, loved getting to know them while they lived with us. Many of the foster children arrived burdened by years of trauma and uncertainty, but with the constant reminder that someone believed in all of us, all of his children, his foster children, his chosen children, his biological children, all of us. We've all flourished. Because believing in people before they proved that they deserved to be believed in, for Tom, that door was always open. My dad made everyone feel like family. You probably all felt that. That's why you're here. And unless you really know our family well, you sometimes can't quite tell where the bloodline ends and the friendships begin. Even on the inside, that was a little confusing. In fact, it was about the year 2000. My son Houston was born, and Uncle Joe was one of the first people to show up to hug him and hold him. And it was so special to have Joe sit there, Uncle Joe sit there and hug Houston. And as he was hugging him, I realized Joe doesn't have the same last name as the rest of us. Joe's not actually my uncle. We're not even related. But by this point in my life, it hardly even mattered. Joe, are you here? I think you're here somewhere. There he is, Joe. I love you, Uncle Joe. Because for Tom, making everyone feel like family, that door was always open. He really enjoyed making people feel welcome, and so after he bought his house there in Bluebell, he expanded the kitchen out into the garage and took over all that space, because of course everybody congregates in the kitchen, and to make everybody feel welcome, he made a giant kitchen. He built all the cabinets, my granddad built all the cabinet doors, and we'd sit at the table there at the end of the kitchen, and there wasn't a week that went by that we didn't have somebody just walk in the front door. sit down at the dinner table. Sometimes we'd make them a plate and they'd join us, and sometimes they'd just talk for 5 minutes and then leave or print something or whatever they had to do. And I didn't find it unusual because that's just how our front door worked. People would show up and walk right in. So it was so common that in about 2023, we think it was Bernadette Warman from about 3 houses down, walked into the house, just walked in, said, "Hey, Tom and Maxine." And a guy named Coach Murphy was there and said hello and started talking, and they had a conversation. And finally, Coach Murphy said to Bernadette, what can I do for you? Can you imagine the surprise on Bernadette's face when Coach Murphy explained that Tom and Maxine had sold the house 3 months ago? Tom and Maxine were no longer there. Coach Murphy is now the owner of that house, and Bernadette had just walked in. Because walking into a random person's house unannounced, to Tom, that door was always open. I think this love, this welcoming, can be explained by the convicted murderer, Danilo Cavalcante. Go Birds. When Danilo Cavalcante escaped from jail and was running around this area, Chester County, there was lots of discussions about it. And my dad brought up that discussion, that conversation, to his Bible study. And he said, what if Danilo showed up at your house? What would you do? And as I understand it, most of the people in the Bible study were pretty offended. This is a convicted murderer. It's a hypothetical, but that's a really dangerous question. But to my dad, it wasn't a hypothetical. It was how he lived. He would say, of course you're welcome in. Of course I trust you. Of course you're my favorite. I'm sorry, what was your name? I forgot. I never met you before. He was trusting before because that's what Jesus would have wanted him to do. And fearlessly living the way Jesus taught us, for Tom, that door was always open. He had a frantic need to participate in everything going on. You've all felt it. He wants to be there to fix the printer. He wants to be there for the play and the sporting event and the wedding and the cakes, and I'll run to Costco and get them. He wanted to make every event happen. And he viewed a clock as just a way of understanding where the sun was around the world. It didn't matter if it was midnight or midday. It didn't matter at all. He was willing to be there and get involved. In fact, in the last week of his life, he spent a few days down in Nashville helping his grandson Houston move into his first house. He spent a few days in Pittsburgh at a resort called Nemacolin, where his granddaughter Carolyn had an art residency. He was here at this church at Barbara Rose's funeral. He was helping Habry the night before he passed away. He was helping Habry work on her insurance plans for 2026. And the day he died, he was supposed to head to New York to go meet his great-grandson, Benjamin. For Tom, every door was open. The door to friendship, the door to adventure, learning and prayer, helping and growing and just being together. Because as all of you know, as all of you have felt, showing up anytime, anywhere, for anyone, for any reason, for Tom, that door was always open. But then, on the morning of December 11th, my dad encountered a problem that he couldn't spreadsheet his way out of. A ventricle in his brain sprung a leak. He started feeling off. He sat down. He pressed his medical alert button. And by the time help arrived, he was breathing but unresponsive. As the EMTs transported him out of his apartment, they locked the door behind him. The door that had always been open was now closed. And yet somehow we know that's not the end of the story. So the question is, now what? Because my dad didn't just open doors for himself. He opened them for all of us. So now it's our turn. Yep, you in the balcony, it's your turn too. Ignore the clock. Show up. Play the game. Risk dying of a dislocated finger. Share everything we have. Believe in people before they believe in themselves. Tom gave us each other. This spectacular room full of love and caring, so that we could do this together. He knew that we could. He knew that we would. Because for Tom, that door was always open. Thank you.
My kids are making fun of me over here. Stop there.
So what a fun thing to follow. So we're the grandkids and great-grandkids. So the next we're going to sing a song, The Goodness of God, because part of why Bevo was the way he was because it was backed by the love of Christ, and that was poured into him, that he poured out on everybody else. So as we sing this song, the best thing that you guys can do is be yourself and sing along with us. So that's it. I don't know what's going to talk.
I've been held in your hands from the moment that I wake up until I lay my head. I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my goodness
themselves because this hugging is going to take a little while. We didn't have that on the spreadsheet.